James, for the benefit of listeners, would you please be able to give us a little bit of an insight into your background and journey within nutrition?
Yeah, cool. So, yeah, thanks for the invitation to obviously come on and share some information today about nutrition. But yeah, my brief background is travelled the world 18 to 21, had no ambition to get into nutrition at all. Actually lived over in Canada as a snowboard instructor. So that was a crazy period of my life. And then at 21, started at Liverpool John Moores University, did an undergraduate degree in sports science, rolled straight on to the Masters in Sports Physiology. And at this point, hadn't really kind of delved into nutrition at all. So kind of rolled through that Masters year, floating around the idea of S&C and a bit of nutrition. And then it was towards the back end of the Masters that, nutrition started kind of getting my interest. And I suppose learning about how manipulation of nutrition can result in certain outcomes of body composition change, fueling performance, recovering muscle, etc. And then I was fortunate enough actually to embark on a PhD in sports nutrition. And that was, again, at Liverpool John Moores University, but that was funded in its first year by Widnes Vikings, which is a rugby league team in the Northwest. And then in the second year, I went over to Warrington Wolves and basically finished the second and third year of the PhD at Warrington as a full-time performance nutritionist in the club whilst studying nutrition at the university. So it was, I look back with many fond memories of working in the rugby club. Amazing opportunity to work with professional players, but also what I was learning in the lab and in the university on the Monday, I was then going into the club on the Tuesday and applying that practice. So building up that, I guess what I would call craft knowledge, and the applied or the translational application of that into your players the next day was amazing to build up that experience. So that was the PhD. I then finished that PhD about 2.5-3 years ago now. And since then I've had applied performance nutrition roles with West Ham. So I did kind of 6 to 8 months with them in the Premier League as a bit of a consultant. I've then also worked with professional boxers. So Rocky Fielding from Liverpool, he's a Scouse lad that is now living over in the Cayman Islands very comfortably. And then one that Chris Billam-Smith from Bournemouth, so helping him out. And then outside of that, I've also worked with Formula 2, Formula 1 drivers, looking after their nutrition strategies for motorsport, a couple of private things here and there, and then also England football at the FA. So looking after the nutrition strategies for our national players. So yeah, a bit of a whirlwind tour there.
Yeah, a lot going on. How, obviously, a lot of your background there is rugby based. How do rugby and football relate in terms of nutrition? And something that we've touched on just before recording is how apparent nutrition is to rugby players, and maybe how not as important it is for footballers in terms of what they know. How is the relation between rugby and football?
Yeah, I think, look, from my experience alone anyway, one thing that I saw in rugby was that the players knew how big they needed to get, and they knew that in order to build and accumulate muscle and hypertrophy, unless you were going to start dabbling with things that you shouldn't dabble with, it was nutrition. It was nutrition and training hard. And the thing with rugby players is that they all rip in and train hard. It's the mentality and the culture of the sport. And so the other thing that they then needed to support that was good nutrition strategies. And the good thing with rugby players is that the majority of them are still very well grounded and well respectful to the staff. And so quite often I would say to the players, look, do you want to know about the science? Do you want to know about why I'm telling you what I'm telling you to do? Half of them were interested, but the other half would just be like, mate, just tell me what I need to eat to get massive. And that's quite refreshing sometimes, because you just give them the strategy and they go away and run with it. So I think in rugby, they know they need to be big. And then combined with that is that you've got not only do you have exercise-induced muscle damage, and what I mean by that is the contraction of muscles from running, but you then also have impact-induced muscle damage, which is the physical collisions of a 120 kilo bloke running into 320 kilo blokes. And that blunt trauma that results in damage and inflammation of muscle needs repairing. And you can repair it from things like ice baths, cryotherapy, massages, the game ready, the cold compression garments, but the other massive area is nutrition. And so I think the rugby boys knew that as well, and they would understand and feel the benefit of when they followed a good recovery nutrition strategy to when they didn't, and they would feel it the next couple of days. So I guess from a rugby point of view, they buy into it quite early on, I guess, in their careers. I guess the difference I've seen in football is that one could argue that the pure skill and talent of the individual could arguably see them rise to the top quite quickly. And sometimes what you find with players is that because they've never really had that education around how important nutrition can be for performance and recovery in football, but they've made it quite big already, then sometimes the mentality a little bit is, I don't really need it because I'm where I am now and I've never had that education. And I guess that's some of the slight hurdles that I've seen in my practice with football players. Not that it's a negative, it's a great challenge to have, because when you do start drip feeding and dangling the carrot of, by the way, if you increase carbohydrate content here, that will result in more distance covered, and they implement it and feel it, they're brought in and they're sold. And I've experienced that a lot recently with some of the female athletes. So that's probably the difference I've seen, yeah.
I myself, and I probably speak on behalf of a lot of footballers, especially at my age, who are coming to the end of their career, haven't, like you say, been educated, or probably detriment to myself, sought education out to understand how important nutrition is really, and just have sort of plodded along as I've gone. To get into football specifically now, how important is nutrition to elite football performance?
Yeah, I'm only grinning because I'm obviously super biased, but I would argue that in the congested windows that a lot of football players are facing right now, and the major tournaments that arguably national teams and Premier League teams will face, Champions League, Europas, I think it's probably one of the most important disciplines in and around the 72-hour window of match play. So that there's definitely a time and a place where nutrition ramps up, but also ramps down. And I think it's important practitioners know that, but also athletes know that. So I'll give you an example. Match day -4 Monday morning might not be the time where you go, balls deep on nutrition education for the player, because arguably they might want to review the game. So that might not be the time and a place to focus on it. But I think if you've got a player that's physically fit, respiratory fit, they know that they can do the 90-minute game in terms of covering best part of 10 kilometres, which is 1 kilometre every 9 minutes. You could go and walk that now, no problem. So physical fitness is there. Have they got the ability to produce the intensive and extensive demands of that game repeated time and time again? And if you don't put the right fuel in the tank to allow that to happen, you will experience the early onset of fatigue. You will experience the blow up in the legs, the lactic acid. You will begin to drop off back into the game. There's a reason why a lot of goals get slotted in the last 5 minutes of games. It's because players are tired, they're switching off, they're running out of energy. So I think that 72-hour window around a game is crucial, really, for nutrition, because match day -1 is all about fueling. Can we get the right amount of glycogen within the muscles so that the player is ready to go and do 90 minutes as hard attacking football as they can? Match day, are we topping up the glycogen stores with breakfast, pre-match meal? Are we doing the right thing with caffeine intake? If someone's taking caffeine, have we brought in nitrates to help increase the vasodilation of the blood vessels to get more working blood or oxygenated blood into the muscles? And then during the game, is there a player that is not taking on any fuel at all during the 90 minutes? We know that the moment the game starts, the petrol tank starts to decrease, the gauge is dropping. So why wait until it drops before we put the fuel back in? Half-time strategies can be crucial. If you're in a tournament or FA Cup situation where it might go extra time and penalties, that's 120 minutes of football. It's not 90 minutes anymore, 120 minutes. Like, that's an endurance event. And then the next stage to that is that acute recovery window. Are we nailing the first 4 hours of recovery after match play to allow that body to firstly rehydrate, secondly replenish the glycogen that the muscles need to recover, and then third and fourthly is repair the muscle that's damaged and then recover overnight. And then next to that is then match day plus one, because recovery doesn't just happen in 4 hours. You've obviously got a day the next day, typically the recovery day, where we've got to nail it as well. So I think that 72-hour window around the game is crucial. But then, you could argue, okay, match day plus two, if they've nailed that recovery, we might have to like drop it off a little bit so they can focus back on training and focus on the gaffer having a team talk and blah, blah, blah. I think it's crucial, mate. And I think the best players in the world know that and they nail it. And probably the best example I've got is someone like Ronaldo, who has got his own chef. He is on the money with nutrition. Like, if you compare him at 17 at United, where he was arguably, the skill was there, the talent was there, but he was quite thin and light, not very strong. You look at him now, he wouldn't look out of place on a rugby pitch as a centre. So what that bloke's got there is a huge accumulation of muscle and lean mass. And you get that from good nutrition and hard training.
I think, touching on Ronaldo there, it's somebody who is almost a blueprint now for a lot of footballers to aspire to. And as you've just touched on, the progression from 17-year-old Manchester United and how he looked physically and to how he is now, something for people to try and emulate. But have you seen a relation to like the top level and nutrition being more important? Because guys now at lower levels, young players aspiring to become professionals, need to start understanding that to get to that level, nutrition is something that they're going to have to buy into.
I think so. And I actually still think there's a massive window of opportunity for players in those lower leagues. And I thought about this a lot actually with other people, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, because you'll be better placed to shoot me down if I am wrong. But like, if we look at, for example, League 2, League 1, one could argue that the skill level and the agility level and the fitness level of like all of those players in those two leagues are not going to be too dissimilar from each other. So like the average like skill level, if you were to FIFA rank them, like they'd all be floating in and around like a 6.8 or a 7 or something like that. So you've then got to look at, well, what else is it I can do as a player that sets me apart from the other bloke? Because your skill and agility level is arguably the same as everyone else in the league, because that's why you're in that league and that's why you're not in the Premier League. But the one thing that you could control that someone else might not be doing properly is sleep, recovery, and arguably what you put in your mouth. No one else can spoon feed you. And so it's down to you if you want to take that on yourself and not just rely on what Sarah, the dinner lady, puts out for breakfast and lunch and dinner, but you take a bit of onus on it yourself. And I've always wondered, like, at that level, if you were to get a bog standard squad, the skill, agility level, they were just bog standard, bog average in the league, but then you absolutely nailed nutrition with every single one of them. They all fueled textbook, they all recovered textbook. You all got them down to unbelievable body composition like Ronaldo. I've always wondered whether that USP on that team would result in them like rising to the top, because they've still got the average skill level of everyone else, but what they've done is they've absolutely nailed the 72 hours around a game.
It'd be very interesting to find out, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
So to start breaking it down into, obviously we've got loads of information to talk about, but to break it down a little bit more, something that we've previously spoken about before sitting down today, how important is fueling correctly for the demands of the day And for players like myself who've probably never heard that before, what does that mean specifically?
Yeah, so I guess simply put, it talks about if Monday's physical demand going through the body is different to Tuesday and is different to Wednesday. So if Monday is a single training day, Tuesday is a double, and Wednesday is a rest day, should you or should you not be consuming the same amount of calories on each day? Because you could argue that you've got a really heavy training day, physically demanding on the body. You've then got a medium day, and then you've got like a complete rest day recover. So what I guess in the nutrition world, it's those days then require a different nutritional support package. You don't need to consume the same amount of calories on each day because your physical demand is different. So if you're expending, say, 4,000 calories on your double training day, if you want to grow lean mass and you want to start building up a little bit, you can't consume 2,000 calories on that day because you've got like a negative of 2,000. You need to, if you're burning 4,000, you've got to consume 4,000 and some. On Tuesday, if it was a single training day and you're only burning in the day 2,500 calories, if you consume 4,000, you've probably overdone it a little bit. But likewise, if you consume 2,000 and you're burning 2,000, you've probably matched it quite well and you've fueled for the demands of the day. On the recovery day, if let's say your total energy expenditure, which by that I mean how many calories are you burning on that day, on that recovery day, let's say it's 1,800 calories as an example, but you then decide, can't be bothered eating today, I'm only going to have 1,000. You haven't fueled your recovery day properly. So what we talk about in the literature is nutritional periodization and fueling for the work required. And in the S&C world and football training world, it will be your periodization of training where you have your double training day, single day, rest day, game day. Your physical demand of the body is undulating through the week, and nutrition has to match that. And I think the biggest area that I've seen across athletes probably and team sport athletes is players not realising actually how many calories they need. So a good colleague of mine, Dr. Marcus Hannon, who's actually head of nutrition at Aston Villa at the moment, he's just finished his PhD at Liverpool John Moores University, and he's got a brilliant study where he's looked at the energy expenditure of Everton Academy football players. And he's got the under 12 and 13 age group. He's then got like the under 15, I think it's under 15, 16s, and then the under 18s to 21st. And he's got under 15, 16-year-old football academy players burning 4,500 calories a day. I don't think there's any 14 or 15-year-old football player eating 4,500 calories because they just don't know that. So at that age, you've got to look at, okay, you've got an individual athlete at 14, 15 in the prime of his growth and maturation and adolescence, where bone health is important, his mental ability at school to focus, his growth, his maturation, so important at that age, but you're under-fueling him. So is he going to develop as well as he could do? And sometimes that's why you see quite a high injury rate in some of these younger players coming through, because the physical demands are massive, but they haven't got the energetic support of nutrition to match that and support it. So I guess the biggest area, well, not the biggest, but one area of concern with these young players is these little hairline fractures that they're getting with bones, and that is a clear sign of underfueling. Whose problem is that? Whose fault is it? Because the 14-year-old ain't going to know that he needs to eat 4,500 calories a day. Mum and dad probably don't know that. And so it's the education of us as qualified nutritionists to get that information across. And just on a practical term for people listening, one thing that Marcus brought into that group of players was it was almost like a pit stop. And it was, they finished school, they arrived to training, and before they started training, they all had like a blended up kind of banana milk smoothie. It was about 300-400 calorie smoothie that they all drank before they went and trained, but it was an extra 300-400 calories they were getting before training that they were never getting. And it was little things like that he was implementing through the day that allowed that player to start building up the total calories that he was eating so that he could match the demands of his training day.
Right. So for these young players, and I would say for 15 to 20, that sort of youth team age where professional football starts becoming serious. How can I take responsibility about, as you say, like how much I do need to eat on different days? And what sort of stuff can I actually eat within, because you're talking about 4,500 calories for a young player who might just see calories and end up seeing a burger that's 2,000 calories and think, oh, I'll do that in one hit instead of actual food. What's the difference between the two?
Yeah, I think that probably the easiest way for the listeners to apply this in their own practice would be, you know, I know the literature and I know the research because it's what we read day in, day out. And in the literature, if people do want to go and read it, I'll put it in the show notes for the papers because it's fascinating. But the kind of ballpark figure that different positional groups will burn could be in the region of like 2,000 calories up to 4,500 calories, depending on the physical demands of your day. One way that you can track it, which a lot of us do at the moment, is the activity watches, having a look at how many calories did I burn in that session. And then kind of adding that to the total amount that you need that day. But what we say on a real practical term is that on a typical football training day, you should really be consuming in the region of 2 to 4 grams per kilogram of carbohydrate per kilogram of body mass. So to keep the numbers simple, if you were 100 kilo, my recommendation to you would be to have, if it was 3 to 4 gram per kilogram, it would be 300 to 400 grams of carbs on that day. So if we stick with the carbohydrates for now, so then if you know, right, this is my training day, majority of my footy training, I might do mid-morning training, mid-afternoon. If that's where you know the bulk of your training is, then you can fuel the training sessions properly. So we'd want, out of that 300 or 400 grams of carbs, which is your total amount for the day, we definitely want a good amount going in at breakfast so that we can fuel that morning training session. Definitely want some after that morning training session, so that lunch block, so that we're recovering from morning and then getting ready for the afternoon training. And then you would probably want some after that second training block so that you can recover properly. So then if your total amount was 300 grams, you then got to break it down and go, right, okay, breakfast, lunch, dinner, ballpark figure, 100 grams in each of those meals, as an example. What gives me 100 grams of carbs in the morning? I know, for example, a couple of bits of toast would give you 40-ish grams. Glass of orange juice might give you 20 grams. You could have a bowl of porridge, might give you another 30 grams. So before you know it, you've made up your 100 grams of carbs as fuel ready for the morning session. And that's how you've almost got to approach every single day from a fueling point of view. The next macronutrient that is highly important for any professional athlete, but normal person as well, is protein. And the recommendation that we would provide for athletes is a minimum of 1.6 gram per kilogram, up to 2.5, depending on what your individual goal is. But if we go in the middle and say 2, so 2 gram per kilogram of body mass of protein at 100 kilos, 200 grams of protein, and then you apply the same kind of framework, if you like, for the protein and say, right, I've just had an 8-hour sleep, so I probably need some protein in the morning when I get up so that I've got some protein in the body to help the muscles. And I also want some protein in first thing before I go and do some exercise so that I'm protecting the muscles. Definitely want some at lunch, definitely want some at dinner. And then the biggest window that we see players forget about and miss is pre-bed. And the pre-bed window is a massive area that I don't think there's many that nail properly.
I've not heard that before.
To help recover them as they're sleeping. So you're almost stacking it. So you've got, right, there's my carbohydrate layer through the day. Here's my protein layer through the day. And then what other little things can I add in on top? Hydration, yeah, I'm on the money with that. Am I sleeping properly? Yeah, okay, I've got that. Do I want to add in things like creatine to help grow a little bit of muscle? Do I want to bring in some nitrates? But I think you've really got to nail the foundations first of getting the right amount of carbs in and the right amount of protein in.
A lot of football environments are one size fits all. And I don't mean that as in everybody's being asked to eat the same thing, but everybody's offered the same thing. So breakfast, where I play, obviously the same foods are provided every day. At lunch, the same food is provided for all players to have whatever they like of, and it's probably the same as most football clubs. how do I know as an individual if I need more than my teammate or if I need less than my teammate?
Yeah. It's like the golden question, isn't it? And I suppose the way that the scientific literature would measure that is to do some really cool studies where you look at that energy expenditure of the individual players in individual positional groups. So keeping it simple, we know that outfield players normally would expend more calories than a GK just because of physical demands of training and match play. You could probably break that down further and say your wing attackers who are constantly going up and down, Robertson, Trent, expending some decent calories versus your holding defender who's still playing a 90-minute game but might not be as explosive and extensive. So I guess to answer your question directly, you've almost got to look at your own, zoom in at your own individual game, the way that you train and the way that you play, and think, right, GPS-wise, how many kilometres did I cover in that game? Christ, it was 12K. Whereas your mate might have only covered 8. So you now know that you're going to need a little bit more recovery than he has. So it's pointless you both eating the same recovery food because you need more. And it's also then based on body weight as well. If you're a heavier person and you're a bigger bloke, you're going to need more food to help fuel and recover. So I suppose at the lower level, it can be difficult to try and figure out how much do I need. But going back to the principles of 3 to 4 gram per kilogram each day, and then that 2 gram of protein, I think that would be a good ballpark figure for players to focus on. And I would bet good money that the majority of football players at the moment don't consume as many carbs as they should do, and they don't consume as much protein as they should do. And I think adding those two things in can dramatically change how someone feels during training, but also recovers after training sessions. I suppose just on that note, I guess why is the reason that I think that? I think there's, over the years, and probably the influence and impact of social media and body image and body composition hasn't helped. And I think we have gone through a bit of a phase or a cycle of where, a carbophobic culture where, now I'm going to go ketogenic, I watch Game Changers, I want to try this. If we go back to what gives the body energy, what supplies muscles with glycogen, it's carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are king for pushing the boundaries of physical high-intensity performance. It's like you trying to run your car without any petrol. It's not going to go anywhere. And it's the same analogy, really, in football. We've got to give the body energy. And I think increasing that energy intake from carbohydrates daily, but also on a match day -1 to fuel for the game would be a dramatic improvement in a lot of football players.
Touching on what you just mentioned there about this social media influence and influencers who are always posting pictures of looking as they do, and footballers are obviously athletic looking people. Do you think aesthetic, physical, how people want to look is outweighing what they're eating to actually fuel their body?
Oh, it's a good question. No, I don't think it's as bad as some may think. I think the biggest, certainly in rugby, the body composition, the boys aren't really that bothered. What they're bothered about is how hard can I hit in a tackle? Can I play 80 minutes? Whether I've got an accumulation of fat mass. Okay, one could argue that if you lose some of that fat and you become more functional, you'll play better. But there's also some of the best rugby players in the world in their position are quite tubby, but they're fit and they'll play 80 minutes, no problem. I think in football, I don't think it's necessarily the want and the requirement to look good is getting in the way. I think it's just the uneducation. So I know players that would veer away from carbohydrates because they think that carbs make you fat. And I don't think that's the pressure of I need to look slim on an Instagram post. I think what we're finding there is that no one's actually given them the time of day and sat them down and explained why carbohydrates help physical performance and shown them some of the science. I think I know players, and I giggle at myself sometimes, but I'm really passionate about the science and the evidence-informed practice that I've spent 9 years of my life learning. And sometimes when you show a player a figure or a scientific graph, they might giggle at the start and, here we go, geeky science stuff. But then when they understand it and they go, oh, Christ, yeah, it makes sense now. Like I said, you've dangled that carrot, they've got it, and they're like, actually, can you share a bit more of that? And I've had that recently with some pretty high-profile players where you explain something that could be quite technical, but in a pretty simple way. They get it, they put it into practice, they feel the benefit of it, and bang, non-negotiable now. That's how I'm doing my match day -1. I can't believe I used to not eat that.
Have you seen any, you touched on it just before, the Game Changers documentary. There's a new one that's just come out, the Seaspiracy, that's putting people off fish. Is there any relation to those kind of programs and then people picking up habits or dietary requirements that are making fueling for the day difficult?
Yeah, I've seen Game Changers, but I haven't seen the Seaspiracy one, but that's on my watch list. But yeah, do you know what? It was a really interesting period where Game Changers came out in particular, because what we did see was a lot of talk about nutrition all of a sudden, and we got really excited as nutritionists because nutrition was actually like at the top of the table a little bit. Normally.
I've got to be honest, I tried it.
Yeah.
I've got inflammation in my body all over, and I've obviously, having watched it and seen how it had an impact on inflammation, I tried it, and I can't say that I felt incredible. So I didn't really know the difference between how I felt, but I certainly felt good.
Yeah, it's an interesting. So let me ask you a question. So when you tried it, what did you drop out of your diet? But what did you bring in?
Yeah, I didn't. And so I dropped meat, I dropped fish, and it wasn't actually until probably a month, 2 months in that I weighed myself and realised that I'd lost quite, like, I'm slim as it is, but I'd lost a bit of weight. And the moment I got on those scales and saw where I was, the couple of months before, the physio ended up saying, "Oh, you were this weight," and I was on the scales, and I was like, "Oh, I've lost a lot of weight, and that's not good, especially as I don't carry a lot of weight anyway."
And what weight was it?
I can't remember specifically what it was, but I'm usually about 85 kilograms, and I was about 70, high 70s, 78, 77. And I just remember thinking, like, a lot of people are saying to me almost like, "Oh, you look a bit slimmer," and didn't think anything of it until sort of thought, like, actually, this probably isn't being as beneficial to me as what I thought.
Yeah. And so what I meant with the question there in terms of weight, was it fat mass that you lost, or was it muscle?
Probably a combination of the two.
Yeah. And so there's that we'll pick up on. And then the other side of it, so if you dropped out fish and you dropped out meat in the diet, for you to get your calories in a day, you would have had to increase whatever else you were already eating, which a lot of the time with the players, it was, right, I can't eat that. I can't eat meat. I can't eat fish. What I can eat is carbohydrates, and what I can eat is a load of salad and vegetables. And so what we saw is not only was nutrition at the forefront of the table, and it generated actually a lot of discussion around nutrition, which was amazing because people were interested. Why were they showing that? Why was that the effect? Why was this happening? But we also saw a lot of players increase carbs, which hopefully now you're getting the point I'm trying to make about players that potentially undereat carbs. And then what they also increased was a lot of fruit and vegetables in the diet because they couldn't eat anything else. Like, if you're not having meat, you're not having fish, like, you've got to increase it, otherwise you're not going to eat. And so there was actually, it resulted in some really good nutritional behaviours that happened, i.e. increased carbs, increased fruit and veg. But also what we saw was players dropping weight, players not actually recovering as well as they should or used to recover, and players picking up little niggles and knocks and things like that entering. And the biggest thing, the reason I ask about what weight was it that you lost in terms of fat mass or lean mass, was inevitably, if you knock fish and you knock meat out of the diet, for you to now hit your 2 gram per kilo of protein per body mass per day, you've got to eat a lot of plant-based protein, and you've got to eat a lot of mixed plant-based protein to make sure that you've got that full amino acid profile going into your body every day. And there's a key amino acid that we talk about, which is leucine. And leucine is the light switch. It's the regulator of building new muscle protein. And it's in abundance in meat and fish. It's not in abundance in plant-based protein. Pea protein does quite well, but not many people know that. So what a lot of people did was they knocked protein on the head to an extent. They ramped up fruit and vegetables, carbs, so they were fueling really well all of a sudden, but not recovering well and not looking after muscle that well. And weights were starting to drop off because we need protein in the body to look after muscle. So yeah, it generated some fascinating conversations. And some players, I had players that would come in on one camp. Yeah, I'm vegan, vegetarian. Okay, that's cool. Like, we'll have a chat about it. I'm interested. Let's have a good discussion. Fantastic discussions. A couple of months later, are you still trying that? Nah, knocked it on the head, mate. Couldn't do that. I was dropping weight. I hated it. So it was interesting to see how, a Netflix documentary directed by James Cameron, the director of Titanic, and the impact that could have on people's behaviours that were habitual behaviours that they've probably gone through their whole life, which is actually a big area that sports scientists and nutritionists talk about now, which is the whole behaviour change model. So how do I get you to change a behaviour of a lifetime when it's just ingrained in you? It's habitual. I've never had protein before bed. How do I try and get you to change that behaviour? And what that one program did was get people to change their behaviour almost overnight, which showed the impact of how Netflix works, I guess.
Yeah. So this periodized nutrition, which is something that you've spoken about a little bit already, for people who don't know, what does periodized nutrition mean?
Yeah, so obviously we touched on it a little bit earlier, but it's the strategic manipulation of nutrition at certain times of the day to support training adaptation, fueling for performance and recovery, and then potentially injury as well, if we're in that realm. And there's, I guess, a little bit of, not a model, but what we would say in our world is that you've got the 3 T's of nutrition, which is timing, type, and total. So what time of day are you eating whatever it is you're eating? What type of nutrition are you eating? And what's the total amount? And if listeners can put that into practice, every time they put something in front of their mouth to eat it, they've got to be thinking, right, what's the time of day? What type of food am I eating, and what's the total amount? Is the total amount going to help me achieve my 2 gram per kilo of protein total a day? Is the type of food I'm eating a Domino's? Well, it's not going to help that then. Or is it a salmon fillet? Massively going to help. And what's the time of day? It's breakfast. I don't fancy salmon at breakfast. I'll have it at lunch. So if people can regulate and almost like move the chips on time and type and total through the day, and manipulate it in line with training, whether it was a double training day, single day, match day -1, without discrediting the nutrition industry, because it's a very technical industry at times, but it can be as simple as that when you break it down. So that really is what that periodized nutrition is around. Just the same as you would have a periodized training week, or you'd have a periodized strength and conditioning program. As nutritionists, we nicked that term and magpied it, and we can apply that in terms of manipulating what type of food you are eating at a certain time of day in a total amount to match the requirements that you need at that time of day at a certain time of the week. So we talk about, like, I guess one way to think about it is nutrition flatline 7 days a week? No, it shouldn't be. So then let's focus on undulating it day to day, week to week, month to month, But then if I now focus on Monday, there's potentially 8 feeding windows in Monday. Breakfast, mid-morning, lunch, mid-afternoon, dinner, pre-bed, and then you could argue maybe a couple of snack windows through the day. Should every single one of them nutritional intakes be exactly the same? Should it be 50 grams of carbs, 40 grams of protein, 10 grams of fat every single time? Definitely not. Probably need more protein and carbs at breakfast, a little bit more protein at bed to help with recovery. So then you look at each meal and you go, Christ, I can periodize each meal. I can play around with 3 teas on each meal on a Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday to match the demands that you put your body through day to day as a footy player.
Is there, for footballers then obviously specifically, are there perfect times to eat during the day? I'll talk about pre-performance, post-performance, like evening meal. Should I be looking personally and on behalf of everybody else playing, should I be looking at like set times for all these different meals, or is it okay to fluctuate on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think, on an individual basis, you've got to do what's right for you. So I know that there's some players that don't like to feel heavy before training. They don't want to have a big meal in the stomach and then have to run around for 90 minutes. So with that, you've got to look at, okay, the type of nutrition that's going in the body. Does that individual want 2 bits of toast, 2 poached eggs, a glass of orange juice 30 minutes before training? Like, some people might not want to have that, and that's why they don't eat breakfast. As a nutritionist, I'd be looking at that and I'd be thinking, ideally, we need to get carbs and protein in you so that you've got the energy and that you've got the protein in before the performance. I hear ya. If you don't want to eat 2 bits of toast, poached eggs, orange juice, let's look at how else we can get that in. But if I said to you, I want you to drink a smoothie that's got that much liquid in, but it hits those macros, and have it an hour before your session, you'd probably drink that rather than eat that. So on an individual basis, you've got to work with individual players to what suits their needs. But I would definitely recommend first thing in the morning when you've just had an 8-hour sleep. It's the longest period in a normal 24-hour window where you've had no nutrition into the body. So you wake up, I would argue the first thing you've got to be thinking about is like, right, I've got a 2-hour training session today. I've got to get some fuel in. I've got to get some protein in. So I would say breakfast is a non-negotiable. I then think lunch and refueling after morning training session, non-negotiable. I think even a meal's non-negotiable. And I think pre-bed is non-negotiable. You can then manipulate some of those snack windows around the training. If you've got a player that is 70 kilos and he wants to bulk up to 80, he's got to be putting in that extra nutrition throughout the day to help him achieve that total calorie intake at the end of the day that is higher than someone like you who might just want to sit at your same body weight. So is there a perfect plan for the day? If it was me, I would be going breakfast, mid-morning, lunch, mid-afternoon, dinner, pre-bed. And what you then find actually with having those an increased quantity of time of eating windows, it actually allows you to hit your total requirement for the day a lot easier because you're spreading the total amount over the course of the day.
Less but more often.
Yeah.
A couple of times already you've mentioned this pre-bed and spoke about it as if it's really important. I personally have never heard that or been educated on it at all. Why, in your opinion, is that such a big deal?
Because, well, it's a big deal. So I'm just thinking how to explain this as clear as possible. The majority of the Western world will probably have their dinner at 7, 8 in the evening. And the majority of the Western world will then not have anything else. Like, let's look at you, for example. So you have your dinner 7 or 8, and when's breakfast?
Usually 9 a.m.
Okay, so you've potentially got 13 hours in that 24-hour clock where you've got no nutrition going in the body because you're chilling out on the sofa and then you're going to bed. What we can do with that pre-bed intake is minimize that 13-hour window and minimize it to maybe 10 hours. The reason it's important pre-bed is because you've got a golden opportunity, a window of opportunity to get something in and then let your body do the magic while you sleep. But if you miss the window, you've missed the opportunity. And so it's probably the easiest window for athletes to hit. And it's important to get the actual... So there was a recent UEFA consensus statement brought out by a load of world leaders in performance nutrition and football research. And the recommendation is around 30 to 60 grams of protein, around 30 to 45 minutes before you go to sleep. So that might be a scoop of whey protein with a glass of milk. That would give you roughly 30, 35 grams of protein. It might be that and one of the kind of classic protein yogurts that you see. You've ticked the box. Like that's, if you do that consistently before you go to bed, there is a massive amount of recovery now going on as you sleep. And to keep the science simple, what we're trying to manipulate there is that over the course of the day, we have almost 2 roller coaster lines that undulate over the course of the day. One of them is called MPS, which is muscle protein synthesis. And that is, in simple terms, the building of new protein. And the other undulating roller coaster line is muscle protein breakdown. And what we don't want to do over the course of the day is have a continuous muscle protein breakdown, because when you get to the end of the day, you've broken more muscle down than you've synthesized, than you've accumulated. What we're trying to do is support the body's ability to synthesize new protein over the course of the day, so that at the end of the day, you've got synthesis ends up here and you've beaten the muscle protein breakdown. For those that don't have any protein before they go to bed, you've missed that window of opportunity while you sleep. You're sleeping for 8 hours. So the likelihood is that in the morning, you're waking up with muscle protein breakdown being larger than the synthesis. And then you might have some players that skip breakfast. They go, I don't want to eat before training. I don't like that. Stomach's too full. So then they're training. And then the first protein intake they get, arguably, is either the post-training shake or lunchtime. But the last time you had protein was like 8 in the evening, and then it's now lunchtime, 12, 13. It's like 16 hours apart. And then they wonder why, God, my legs are sore. I'm struggling to put weight on. And it's like, well, you're not supporting your body's, your body's, your aspirations here is to grow and to build, but you're not giving the body enough protein to build. So there's a good analogy that Stu Phillips uses. He's one of the world leaders in protein metabolism. And it's, if I've got a load of Lego bricks here and I'm trying to build a wall, if I'm putting bricks into the wall this end, that's muscle protein synthesis. But every time I do that, muscle protein breakdown is taking a brick out. And the body goes through that cycle every single day. Me and you sitting here now, it's doing that. So if I stop putting protein into the body this end, but breakdown carries on, my wall's not going to get any bigger, is it? Because the breakdown is going to catch up with the synthesis. So what I've got to do is always stay ahead by feeding the body new bricks, new protein all of the time. And the aim of the game, really, if I want to build my body bigger, stronger, develop lean mass, become a Ronaldo, where arguably he's in the best shape of his life, synthesis has to be always one step ahead than breakdown. Otherwise, breakdown catches up and you experience what you did, where you lose muscle.
Many players and guys listening to this, probably people who don't even play football, will have had experience of supplements. And you've touched on there about the whey protein, and will have used different products. What actually are the supplements that footballers should be using, and how should they be using them?
Yeah. Well, look, I think first and foremost, it's important that we remember that majority of football players listening to this will be able to get their nutritional needs from a food-first approach. If you really nail your nutrition strategies, you'll get a much better benefit than what you're doing now. And that is, going back to what we've said about eating correct amount of carbohydrates, really ramping up protein intake now. And I think the majority would get some really good adaptation from that. Having said that, supplements are what they is. Ronsu is what it says on the tin. It's a supplement. They are there to supplement a very, very good nutritional intake already. And where they can come in handy is, if you've got an away day and you're 4 hours on the coach and you've got to travel for a cup game, you haven't got time to stop at the services, but you've got a protein shake in your bag that is a 2-to-1 ratio of carbs and protein. And for you, it's part of your match day strategy to get more glycogen into the body. That's where they can come in handy. So supplements have got their time and place if done correctly. But for me, I think that the ones that the majority of listeners on this should be focusing on is a whey protein, because it's quick, it's efficient, and you know exactly what you're getting. One scoop is going to give you ballpark figure about 22 to 25 grams of protein. So having that as a mid-afternoon snack with milk is a great strategy to be bringing in. So whey protein. One could argue that you could look at a casein protein before bed, which is whey protein is a quick release protein and casein is a slow release protein. And the reason we want that slow release protein before bed is because you're going to bed for 8 hours. And then you've got things like carbohydrate gels, which arguably on a match day -1 and a match day, the sole purpose of that is let's get glycogen in your muscle so that we can fuel performance. And that's where they can come in very handy. So you'll see it now. You'll see a lot of the Premiership players side of the pitch have it sipping on the gels, and that is a supplement directly to get glycogen into the body, ready for the second half. You could argue that some may want to focus on caffeine intake. Obviously, one that needs to be controlled a little bit more carefully because you don't want to overdo caffeine intake. But there's some quite nifty caffeine gums on the market where they've got 100 milligrams of caffeine per gum. So for someone that wants a quick kind of pick me up before the game, you could have that 5-10 minutes before kickoff, and that would give you a good quick release of caffeine before the game. And then you've got things like creatine. So for, let's say you're 19-year-old player who really got to grips with nutrition now, protein at 2 grams per kilo, but he just wants that little bit of a help to accumulate a bit more lean mass and muscle mass. He might benefit from having like a 3 gram per day creatine intake, and then ergogenic aids like beta-alanine and nitrates. So beta-alanine is a classic buffer of lactic acid. It helps stop that accumulation of lactic acid in your legs when they're blowing up. So that can help with high intensity performance. And then the nitrates act as a bit of a vasodilator of the blood vessels. So effectively, can we get more oxygenated blood into your legs at high intensity performance by using nitrates as a bit of a product? So there's a few there, but if I were to focus on one or two, I would say a whey protein and then arguably a carb gel for performance. Outside of that, unless you're at the elite end and like you've got everything else dialed on, where we are now in the year, I probably wouldn't bring anything else in.
The like you say there, touching on where we're at in the year. So I'm going to move it on to at the moment, as I'm sure you're aware, in the circumstances we're in, there's most levels are relentless at the moment in terms of fixture congestion, and Saturday, Tuesday games almost every week. I myself have them until the end of the season now. Apart from the elite guys obviously have different cup competitions, and the championship is well known for the amount of games that they play as well. How can nutrition support players during periods of congested fixtures?
Yeah, well, I think we've almost got to go back to that 72-hour window, haven't we? Because when did you say your games are?
Tuesdays and Saturdays.
Yeah, so if you look at that Saturday game, and what time's kickoff?
3 p.m. on a Saturday and usually 7:45 on a Tuesday.
So you've got like your Saturday 3 p.m. finishing at roughly 4:30. So that you've basically got half of Saturday and then Sunday to recover. And then Monday is your fueling day again. So you've almost got like that 96 hours, isn't it really, around from finishing that game on a Saturday to stepping on the pitch again 3.5 roughly days later, well, you've got to nail it. You've got to absolutely nail it. And so that's where nutrition becomes so important for you guys playing that congested window. Because if Saturday's recovery after your game is not on the money, then you're banking on Sunday being on the money so that you're ready on Monday to fuel for the Tuesday game. And I wonder how many footy players are listening to this thinking, I don't even know what I'm eating after a game on a Saturday, or I'm not eating enough, I'm just having a couple of bits of pizza and a bit of Nando's. Or how many players genuinely know how many carbs they're eating after that game, how much protein? And if you miss that window, the knock-on effects of transient fatigue the next day will then get in the way of your ability to fuel ready for Tuesday. It'll be interesting to see how many players feel shot on a Tuesday game but feel fresher for the Saturday because they've had that longer time to recover.
I certainly don't know of many teammates that I've had who would monitor what they're eating after match days, or especially after, it's generic that the guys on a Saturday, like you say, have pizzas, like it's something that's quick, that's easy to get inside your body. But certainly I don't know anyone that monitors what they're having on a Saturday or a Sunday. And
it goes back to my little kind of project that I want to run, where if you've got your average team that are all like average players, but they all absolutely nail recovery on Saturday, it'll be interesting to see how many Tuesday games they win, just purely because they recovered and fueled better than anyone else. And going back to the literature, the UEFA consensus statement on recovery, the aim of the game there is that you want to be having 1 gram per kilogram of body weight of carbohydrates, really for the first 4 hours post-match. So if we use your 100 kilo player again to keep the numbers simple, what we're basically saying is that within that first 4 hour window, we need to get roughly 400 grams of carbs in. Now, 400 grams of carbs is the equivalent of 8 baked potatoes, jacket potatoes. So if you think about that, how many players are having the equivalent of 8 jacket potatoes from the moment they finish the game at R4, arguably to bedtime? I don't think there's many that are having that amount of carb content to nail recovery. So, trying to think how else we, that would be 8 bottles of Lucozade worth of carbs. That's what you need to do to recover properly. Obviously, we're not suggesting that. So you would play around with, right, it might be, full bag of Uncle Ben's rice. I need 2 bananas in a shake. I need a couple of bits of toast before bed. I need a bowl of cereal before bed. Like that's the type of detail you've got to go in to say, no, actually, I know that's 400 grams of carbs. I've nailed it. Whereas a couple of slices of pizza, might have a recovery shake if I'm feeling it. Might have a chocolate bar with the missus. Yeah, I'm done. And that's the sort of recovery strategy that I reckon most people are going through.
Yeah, I've not myself, but like I know that's you touching on the 400 grams of protein there after a match day. Certainly something that carbs. Certainly not something that I do or something that I know any of my teammates are doing. And that moves me on to as well, trying to get your opinion on generically post-COVID or pre-COVID, when things were open, restaurants are open, bars are open, nightclubs are open. For most sports people, and obviously we're talking about footballers specifically, after a match day is normally when people get the opportunity to relax or to go out and have a drink or to go and have a takeaway. I'm not expecting everybody to live life like Ronaldo or to be super, super clean, but for people to understand what's happening to their body when they're going through that experience or going out, drinking alcohol, having the takeaway, what's happening to them when they do that and their recovery?
Yeah, well, I think you've nailed it right. No one's a robot. And so everyone has their vice and everyone has their moments where they want to chill out and be a normal human civilian. We all do it. I eat ice cream. I'm a nutritionist. Do you know what I mean? So I suppose, look, alcohol, touch on that briefly, Is it going to be supportive of body composition goals? Probably not. Is it going to be supportive of recovery from a 90-minute football game? Probably not, because you've got a body that is stressed and needs help repairing. So you look at that and you think, does that mean I've got to go teetotal? I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is you've got to pick your time and place to have an alcoholic beverage. One thing that I worked on a lot with the rugby boys was they win a game, they're going to have a drink. But in particular, one player, he was really struggling to lose the weight, and we basically nailed it down that he was a lager lout. He absolutely loved a bottle of beer. Or at the time, it was a pint. So I said to him, look, go from a pint to a bottle, and you'll reduce your liquid consumption straight away. Reduce the quantity, you reduce calories and fat. So we did that. That didn't mean like then go and have more bottles. It was just still socialise. But so we did that to start with, and then we actually shifted that to like gin and tonics. So we went from like having 350 calories in a pint, which by the way is the equivalent of a Mars bar, to then having like a 90 calorie gin and tonic. And again, and he wasn't stupid. It didn't then mean that he could go and neck G&Ts, but all straight away he was reducing calorie and fat content. And I basically said to him, if you're having 6 pints, if I lined up 6 Mars bars, do you think that's going to help you becoming leaner? No. But you're drinking it. You're drinking the same content. So that was a real education piece for him. So alcohol-wise, I think, look, everyone manages their self. My advice would be, if you are going to go out, just think about what you're drinking and what you're consuming. I would always opt for a bottle of beer rather than a pint. Even better, I'd opt for a spirit and mixer and keep it clear. So that's alcohol. And then the takeaway and kind of the fast food or eating out. Again, I think the whole social aspect that eating out with your missus or your family or your mates gives you is massive. And I actually think that there's a time and a place for certain takeaways. A kind of curry that is laden with oil, arguably questionable meat sometimes. Like, is that going to sit well on a body that is really needing to recover? Probably not. If you went to Nando's, but you got like a boneless platter with rice and sweet potato and some broccoli, for example, or, do you know what I mean? You can see the difference straight away. You're thinking, yeah, do you know what? It's a lot healthier, that. But I'm also looking at it and thinking, right, you've got rice there, refuel, get the glycogen back in. You've got a boneless platter, some good chicken, some good protein going in, got a bit of vegetables going in. That for me is a much better option for someone to have. That's in the recovery meal. The flip of that is to say, do you know what? Could we incorporate a meal out with the family the day before a game and form part of the fueling strategy? If you like going out with your missus and having dinner, you know, if you went to Nando's the day before, but you had mashed potato, rice, chicken, bit of garlic bread, push the boat out, you have a frozen yogurt dessert. But I'm looking at that now as a nutritionist going, that's quite a heavy carbohydrate meal. But do you know what? The day before a game, when you need that fuel for the game, I'm quite happy with that. So I even say it to athletes now, like, we've all been there as children growing up where we had cereal before bed and it was like the Vice, wasn't it? Like Wheatos or Golden Nuggets. I think if there's a time and a place for a bowl of cereal before bed, it would be the night before a game, to get that extra 30, 40, 50 grams of carbohydrate with some milk before you go to bed to help fuel that body ready for the next day's game. As a nutritionist, I don't have a problem with that at all.
So guys trying to combine the experience of going out with having in the back of their mind, is this going to benefit me as much as possible?
Yeah. So like, you know, the whole dessert side of stuff, you know, time and place of the week, match day -1, your requirement as 100 kilo players to get 600 grams of carbs in you. I know that if you were to go and order, let's say, a Victoria sponge with some vanilla ice cream as a dessert, you're probably going to get about 50, 60 grams of carbs in that dessert. That's not me saying have that every night, because that won't support body composition. But in that instance, to help get the carbs in you ready for the game tomorrow, it's quite a good strategy to follow.
So when we're talking about -1 and -2, obviously people know that as, the days before and the days after a game. How many days before a game should I start considering that my diet is going to have an effect on my performance on a match day? For example, if I've got a Saturday 3 p.m. game, should it be my focus from a Thursday, or am I only thinking about it the night before a game?
Yeah, I guess, the timing of kickoff is important, but we almost look at the day before / 36 hours. So if you've got that 3 o'clock kickoff on the Saturday, I would be looking at Friday morning and saying, right, let's nail this now. Friday morning, I get up and I'm starting my fueling strategy. How can I get 600 grams of carbs in Friday? And that, you break it down: breakfast, mid-morning, lunch, mid-afternoon, dinner with the missus, dessert, pre-bed. And then obviously you've got the day of the game as well. Now, the reason that match day -1 can be so important is because there's a lot of athletes, and I spoke about this earlier, that they don't like feeling heavy. So a lot of them, it's amazing for me to see, but a lot of them will have like a bit of toast and a glass of orange juice, and that's it. Because they want to feel light. They don't want to feel like they need a number 2. They don't want to feel too heavy. And I look at that, and then I then go backwards and I say, cool, you must have nailed match day -1 then. Like, let's hope that you are textbook there, because if you're not, you're under fueling there and you're under fueling on game day. So you're probably 200-300 grams of carbs short. And we see that now a lot. If you said to me, look, James, I can't eat on game day. Like, if I've got a 12 o'clock kickoff, mate, I can't eat. Then that's where we've got to work backwards and say, right, we need to nail this to match day -1 then, so that you've got the right amount of fuel in the body. And there's a lot of players that will not nail match day -1 and then also not want to eat too much leading into a game, and they're underfueled.
Is there, with that in mind, I myself have suffered different times in my career of this performance anxiety of feeling like I can't eat, like I don't want to eat because I'm worried about the game and so on. Is there a way that guys can fuel their body without having to eat? Is it like obviously through shakes or smoothies or anything like that?
Yeah, and it's an option that I've explored with a number of athletes and the boxers as well, because they're, the next day they're going in a ring to beat the blue lights out of someone, and they get nervous. Like, it's so, yes, if you don't want to eat a meal, you can still get fuel in the body. So I mentioned it earlier, a Lucozade, 50 grams of carbohydrates, like a Lucozade or a jacket potato. On a nervous individual, you bet your life they'll sip on that through the day, no problem. One thing I used to use in rugby was Yazoo's. Like, on a nice hot summer's day, you finish captain's run, finish your knockabout on the match day -1, and you rock up with a load of chocolate Yazoo's that are ice cold, and they've got about 55 grams of sugar in them. There's not many rugby players that would say no to that, and it became part of our plan. So again, I quite often I've said to players, would you drink a chocolate milk at some point in that day? Yeah, I could do that easily. And then a classic at breakfast, a lot of clubs will provide the breakfast on a match day -1 or a game day pre-match meal, and a lot of the time there's orange juice or apple juice there. Adding in a small glass of orange juice and apple juice could give you another 40 grams of carbs. But people don't look at it as energy, as fuel. They just see it as orange juice. Whereas I look at it and go, yeah, we have it now. I've had it recently. Could you drink 2 glasses of orange juice with your breakfast? Yeah, no problem with that. Would you eat a bowl of porridge? I might struggle with that because it will make me feel too heavy. So you can play around with where the fuel's coming from, and there's a lot of companies on the market now that they will have a sachet that you put in a 500 ml bottle of water, and in that sachet you might have 80 grams of carbohydrates. The sole purpose of that is to fuel the individual ready for performance. In the endurance world, they lace fuel. a lot of these endurance runners, they'll drink that no problem, and they're doing it because they know they need the fuel to go and run 40k.
I'm gonna pepper you with some quick fire questions, mate, to finish. Put you under a little bit of pressure, but the first one is the top 3 foods all footballers should include in their diet.
Top 3 foods. I would say eggs, because they're one of the most nutritionally complete foods. Very, very cheap to buy, and you can do lots with them. And so eggs has got to be up there. And if you're going to do it, go and buy it from your local butcher. Support the locals. I'd probably say milk, because again, it's cheap to buy. You can buy it in big quantities. You can drink it as a glass. You can add it to cereal. You can put it in a smoothie. You can put it in a whey shake. So you can do quite a lot with it as well. And then I'm going to be really boring and probably say something along the lines of like pasta, rice, potato, or oats. Again, because it's a good solid carbohydrate that's going to give you the energy for what you need.
Top 3 foods all footballers should avoid.
I'd probably say like snacking on pretty useless stuff. So crisps. It's not really going to be supportive of like fueling or recovery, really. Yeah, so I'd probably say crisps, pies, because they're quite calorific but not very good calories, and they can fill you up. That's nothing against pie people. I like a pie, but and then I guess if you're legit and you're genuine about progressing, I wouldn't say consider knocking booze on the head, but depending how focused you want to be, there certainly might be periods of the season where you say, I'm not having booze. Someone who's coming back from an injury, I'd just stay away from it, because it's going to promote the inflammation that your body's trying to reduce.
So anybody listen to this who's a player with a packet of crisps and a pint in their hand, put it down.
Yeah, and I think you see, don't you? Like, you get a lot of players get injured, and then the psychological side of it. I know you've had your injuries. I'm not a player, but I've had injuries, and it is a battle then, isn't it? Of just going to give up for a week, babe. Get the dominoes in. Let's get a couple of beer. Let's get a gin and tonics, and that is not helping that initial acute phase of recovery.
Can you give us an insight into a little bit more on your injury and what you told me before about your nutrition?
Yeah, so again, I'm not a football player. I never will be, and I'm not a very good one. But I ruptured my ACL and meniscus, so I had a significant tear. And yeah, I had it for 10 months, didn't realise, but I went in for surgery, and then I spent a bit of money. I spent about 200 quid to basically get nutrition sorted for that first, arguably 6-8 weeks after the surgery. And I remember waking up actually in the hospital bed, still under the drugs, and the first thing I grabbed was the supplements. And the first thing I put in the body was like, right, collagen, protein, omega-3s, recovery drinks, because I was like, my body now is in absolute turmoil and it's trying to repair itself. I've had major operation, double knee surgery. The body needs good nutrition. And then I nailed it. So, I was saying earlier, I probably followed the textbook nutrition strategies 90% of the time. That included creatine, collagen, vitamin C, omega-3s, whey protein, casein protein, zinc, vitamin D, calcium. I had all of it, following the textbook. And I would like to say that, I nailed that nutritional recovery of it. And then, 11 weeks later, was running 5Ks again and squatting 100 kilo. And that's not me gloating. It was a bit of a case study for myself to see. You hear of these ACL rehabs that go on 9 months. And I was like, nah, surely not. Surely you can't do that. So I had a full ACL recon and my meniscus repaired. And then 11 weeks later, ran a 5K. So just kind of proved to myself really that nutrition is massive in that first stage of that rehab.
Yeah, I think that's an incredible insight, especially someone who's had a similar injury and done the 9 months period where you sort of generically think that it's going to take a long period of time.
Yeah.
That the influence you can have on your own recovery with your nutrition is incredibly important. And if more people that have long-term or short-term injuries know that, hopefully the less time they'll spend injured.
Yeah.
Biggest myths in sports nutrition.
I think there's a bit of a debate, and those that are into nutrition would have heard this, but what's better for high intensity team sport performance? And the argument is it low carb ketogenic or is it high carb glycogen? And I categorically sit on the side of carbohydrates are king, glycogen is king to perform at a high intensity level, especially that intermittent nature of football. So I guess the myth of a ketogenic diet helping football players perform at the elite level, I would say is not going to support the strategy.
Supplements all players should be using.
Yeah, I'd probably say the whey protein and carb gels, like we mentioned earlier.
Best advice you've ever given?
Nutrition advice or?
Yeah, we'll do both. Nutrition advice first.
I'd probably say with the boxer that I worked with, and it was eat more, and that was for a boxer that was trying to lose weight. So it goes against everything that you're probably thinking now. But yeah, it was amazing to see that man eat more food and lose weight at the same time. And that just brought him into the whole process of periodizing nutrition. So that was the best advice I gave.
Nutritionally, what about life advice?
The best advice that I've given to someone. Yeah, it's a good question, isn't it? I'd probably say just do it. I lost my dad a couple of years ago, and one thing that he used to always say was that Nike had the best logo ever because it was just do it. And I think sometimes people think about stuff a little bit too much, whereas life is short, and I think sometimes you just got to do it. Just go ahead and do it.
Good advice. The best sports person you've worked with from a nutrition point of view?
Do you know what? I think I'd probably say Chris Billam-Smith at the moment because he's a very, very slick professional and he enjoys reading it. He enjoys learning about nutrition, and so you can have some quite good detailed conversations with him about it. So yeah, probably him.
When are cheat meals or days okay?
Yeah, I think, look, we touched on it. Matchday -1. If it forms part of a fueling plan, then I'm happy for that. So that would be kind of the day and the meal. And then, I think things like having an ice cream or the cereal before bed, if it helps the individual fuel ready for match play, then ripping.
Knowing what you do now, if you're a young player, say from the age of 15 or 18, aspiring to be a footballer, what would you be doing with your diet?
I would be looking at habitually what is it you do now as your normal process. So what is it I do without even thinking about it? So your breakfast every day might be X because that's just what you do every single day, and your lunch might be this, your dinner might be that. So I'd be looking at what do I habitually do without even thinking about it, and then what can I do listening to this episode to add in and drip feed in extra nutritional content to allow me to achieve the carb and protein content that I now need to achieve based on what we said earlier around 3 to 4 grams per kilo and 2 grams of protein. Because I think the key thing is that what you don't want to do is basically tear up your current plan and just start again, because it never lasts. What you've got to do is look at what you currently do. What do I do well? And what can I tweak? So for you need to add in pre-bed. That's an area that if you change tomorrow, that's a good improvement. So I think it's just, dialing up those little tweak areas rather than tearing it up and starting again.
Yeah, would that be the same for now? If we're talking, I'm going to call them a middle-aged pro, but from the age of 20 to arguably about 28, is that similar advice, or would it change?
Yeah, probably similar, to be fair. Yeah, because I think even at that point, you've arguably got 6-7 years ahead of you. So there might be a little bit more focus on the recovery side of stuff as the body starts to feel it a bit more, and are you recovering exactly as you need to be? But yeah, I would look at a lot of people do some really good stuff already, and it's probably patting yourself on the back to that and saying, "Now, do you know what? I do have my eggs in the morning. I'm doing that right, but one area I'm missing, I'm not having enough carbs." So I would just say, what areas can you tweak?
And similar question, but for the 30+ guys who are looking to prolong or to get the best out of themselves in the last sort of latter years of their career, would it be obviously the same advice again, or would it be a little bit different?
I think at that level, you've probably got to turn a little bit more onto the recovery side of stuff. Really, not cotton walling, but giving yourself a care package every day and saying, right, feeling the niggles now, am I recovering 100%? We used to have it at Warrington. We used to have the kind of 30+ boys, little bit older, body's battered, they've had multiple injuries, surgeries, operations, and we used to just give them a little bit extra, and that might be as simple as some extra supplements to help with sleep and recovery. But yeah, I think the recovery side of stuff, the older you get, is probably more important.
Listen, mate, genuinely, that was incredible insight into elite nutrition within football. Hopefully everybody listening is going to be able to take stuff away. I know I certainly will, but thank you for your time, and I really appreciate it.
All good. Thanks for having us.
Guys, thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that episode with Dr. James Morehen as much as I did, and have some lessons and takeaways to put into your game and try at training tomorrow. Remember to subscribe, like, and review this show via your podcast channel, and press the bell button so you never miss a release if you're watching us on YouTube. Head to the ePerform website for even more football-specific information, and subscribe to our mailing list to get all the best actionable advice straight to your inbox for free. I'm Joe Partington. See you soon.